Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? A drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Bruce Pulver. Bruce is a Christ follower, husband of 28 years, father of 2 adult daughters, 4-time author, podcaster, and full-time global activational speaker. His mission is to impact the life of every person he meets positively. He is passionate about the power of our words and how they affect our thoughts, beliefs, intentions, actions, and ultimately our outcomes in life. His TEDx talk, The Secret to Changing Negative Self-Talk by Renewing Your Mindset, has reached over 250,000 people, and his daily mindset messages have made over 6 million impressions through direct outreach and on his social media channels. His podcast, Can I Have a Word with You, is approaching its first year anniversary of weekly episodes where he unpacks a single word and its impact on ourselves and others merely through how we choose to use it. He has donated thousands of copies of his first book, Above the Chatter, Our Words Matter, to individuals and organizations committed to helping others through rough patches in life. And that includes hospitals, homeless shelters, addiction recovery programs, trafficking and exploitations assistance programs, veteran services, orphanages, and more. Welcome, Bruce. Thanks for joining us today.
Amanda, it's great to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too. During our pre-recording call, we really had such a great conversation, and I love to see what God is doing in people's lives and how he is moving them forward in his purpose and calling. And because of that, I like to do things a little differently. And God is just the best story writer that there is, right? So I like to really highlight the best parts by starting at the beginning, because what I found is when we do that, we often are able to see the thread of God working in our lives, maybe at times that we didn't when they were happening in the moment. And how often do you get the chance to go back and kind of tell your whole story? So I love to start there. And I was wondering, would you be willing to tell us a bit about your childhood?
Absolutely. And I love the way you said that, because hindsight gives us perspective, and you don't really know what you're going through sometimes. And so for me, if we go all the way back to the beginning, there was a miracle in my life, in my mother's life, my father's life, and my brother's life on the day that I was born. My mother went into labor with me, and during her labor suffered what's called medically a dissecting aortic aneurysm during labor, which means
Wow.
the inner walls of the arteries leaving the heart tore, and the blood then began basically pouring into the inner walls of her arteries. And that, up until her experience, had been deadly for every mother within 72 hours of birth. And we were at a hospital that was associated with a medical school that had 2 surgeons who were visiting and teaching aortic valve replacement. And they went right to work on her. She plunged into a 60-day battle, 3 experimental surgeries plus a C-section for me.
Wow.
And emerged from that fully restored. Obviously, there was rehabilitation and recovery for her heart and her, her energy and everything. But that was the launch of my life, and that God was there on day one in ways that if he didn't show up, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, Amanda. And
Yeah, praise God. I love how God provides and how he does make clear from the very beginning in so many stories the miraculous way that he has shown favor and that he's shown he had a plan and a purpose for you.
uh, absolutely. And now that may have had to take some time to come into focus for me, but that was sort of the launch point. I mean, my mom was so grateful about
Hmm.
life, but
Hmm.
I didn't know that other moms weren't always. Does that make sense?
It does.
Or
It does. The environment we grow up in until we start going to other people's homes or getting out into the world, we think everyone lives that way.
yeah, and that was kind of half of the picture because my father, I often say this, he was the silent patient in all of this because you
Hmm.
don't know. Like you don't know day one, day two.
Hmm.
There was a second week that she was in the hospital that he showed up to see her, and she had been taken back for another surgery because there was another tear in her heart, and just not knowing. And we had conversations after that about how much he had to rely on his faith
Yeah.
because he just didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the childhood aspect. I mean, the very beginning that we can talk about Little League Baseball, we can talk about music, which I think we will, but
Hmm.
that was the real pivotal point. I mean, the day I was born was
Yeah.
so impactful.
Yeah, I love how you also talk about that your mom was filled with gratitude. And so if we're going to look at that backstory, we're going to look at that beginning, the opening of your life. Of course she was, because those specialists were there and she did have the surgeries and she did beat the odds and she did survive and she was able to be your mother and you were okay. And so how could she not have a life filled with gratitude? I guess the bigger question would be, was she always that way, or was it your actual birth and all of those miracles that God provided that brought her to that place?
Yeah, such a great question. And I don't know that I have the answer, but because I only right, I'm Captain Obvious here. I only knew her after that. So
Right, right.
some of the history of they got married a little bit later. Dad was in the military during the Korean War.
Hmm.
She was very active in her church growing up, but so I would have to say that would be a yes, very
Hmm.
much appreciative of
Yeah.
what she had. But I mean, to another level, I experienced just with just being grateful for what you have, and it wasn't settling. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, okay, that's enough. It was just actually more than that. Like every day was a greater gift, is what I felt from her.
Yeah, and that's a great place. Let's put a pin there. It wasn't settling. Gratitude isn't settling. It isn't saying, okay, I'm alive, I'm breathing, I can see. That's not what gratitude is. Gratitude is being able to look beyond the circumstances, no matter what they are, and to be able to focus in on something that is a gift, that is good, and that you did nothing to deserve, and to have a connection with it. And then the more that you do that, the neural networks in our brain, the way God created our brain, there's a neural network. The more you choose to do that, then eventually you become expectant for it. And it's just this whole other way of living. Now we could choose the negative as well. We could choose, to always be bitter about things or to always be angry about things. We get the choice. But when you make the choice, it changes everything. And it can change everyone around you and everyone to come. So here you are starting off, that's your environment. And, had you not grown up in that environment, maybe you wouldn't have written the books you've written and had the TED Talk that you had or things like that. So I do think it's so important that we remember, especially if you're listening and you're a parent of a young one, what you do matters and it does help shape who they are.
Yeah, and I wrote the word settle. We're gonna kind of get into a little bit more, I think, in a moment, but let me foreshadow this a bit. To
Hmm.
me, there's a beauty in settling, and that is settling in that we have the grace of Jesus. It's not
Hmm.
a settle like that's you kind of settle into a comfortable chair
Yeah,
is different than settling for something less than you really wanted. So that's the sort of
absolutely.
settling approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you said it's not settling, and it seemed, to me, it's not just saying, oh, yeah, this is enough. It's more than that. But yeah, to settle is to rest in God, and to rest in God is to trust in God. It's to trust in his character and that he knows what he's doing. And yeah, to settle in and trust him is one of I guess that's the sweet spot. It's the best place to be.
Absolutely.
Now, you had mentioned during our pre-recording call that your father wrote as well. He wrote plays and poems. He performed them at church. What are some of your memories of this? Because this is another component of you becoming who you became.
So Dad had a love of words that, only later in life did I realize was sort of a gift that I was exposed to. And one
Mhm.
of the things I clearly remember, or there are two, um, but one was he would write these plays, and there would be a troupe at church, whether it was a byproduct of the choir or just folks who like to kind of, I don't say perform, but kind of be involved in some way in the
Mhm.
church services. And he wrote a couple of plays, and they were just stories that they would tell.
Yeah.
And the thing that he loved about writing these plays was character development. And mostly that I remember is how he would incorporate a person's career or their position or what they did in life as a job or vocation,
Mhm.
and make their name equal what that was. I'll give you a couple of examples. The weatherman at the local television station, he was from Europe,
Mhm.
and his first name was Gustav, and his last name was Wind. So I won't go through all of them, but
Right.
one other was the nursing officer, the chief nursing officer of the hospital. Her name was Ophelia Pulse. So
I
I'll
love
stop there.
that. I
So
love that.
that's what some of the things I remember. And then the stories would be about, just interactions in the small town, or, that sort of thing. And, there was a, maybe a fable or something that he would write about. And of
Mhm.
course, as you're growing up with this and you have memories of this as your dad, no
Yeah.
one else's dad was like that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
dad was kind of cool at a while, and then when you become a teenager, you never want to hear those ever spoken out loud, or any puns or anything. So there was
Right.
that double-edged sword, right? As you
Yeah.
grow through being your dad's son,
Mhm.
oh, that's so cool. And then it's like, oh my God, Dad, can you please not say that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But little did I know that played back into me in the really, really powerful time I needed the forging of
Absolutely.
mom and dad together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing that I just made a little note here when you were talking about the character names and the way that he came up with them, God uses names in a very particular way. And during the time that the Old Testament was written, names described your character. And so, often when I'm really digging into something, I'll go look up what the original Hebrew was of the name, because it has a lot to say, or what the tree meaning was, or whatever the case may be. Those words really had a lot of meaning. And the other thing that God does is, as he changes us through seasons and grows us, he gives us new names, all throughout the Bible. And he promises in Revelation to give each and every one of us a new name written on a white stone that only the two of us will know. So names are really important to God. So is character, and they go together. So I love that your dad did that, because I think he was doing something on a level that you maybe didn't understand as a child, that was really validating the things that God looks at, the heart. That's what we should be called, who we are really on the inside.
Yeah. I'll share one last one as we move forward. The minister at the church, she was academic. She was very academic in studying
Hmm.
the Bible, and her name was Pastor Present. Knew the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Uh, that's
Anyway,
awesome. Yeah, I love his punniness as well. That's just really, really very sharp and very smart. Now, both of your grandmothers were a really big part of your life growing up. How so?
yeah. So my sort of, not, I want to say direct memory, but sort of the storytelling memory was when my mother's surgery occurred, and when she spent 60 days in the hospital. The two grandparents came into town, rushing into town to support my dad.
Hmm.
Um, we were in Connecticut, and one of the grandparents, my dad's mother, was in Boston, so just a few hours of a drive. And my mother's mother was in Florida. She had retired down there, and she came up. And so they
Mhm.
just they came up with the list, divided the chores,
Mhm.
um, took care of us when I came home and my older brother, so that my dad was free to be with my mom. And so my memory there is the stories told, as an infant, that they were there. And I also know that from probably from my mother's gratitude, a lot of that came from her mother, who was widowed
Mhm.
and raised three children. And I just remember mom just saying, everything works out for the best, and keep your nose to the grindstone, and
Yeah.
all those type of things that came from her mom raising her.
Yeah.
So that was probably the earliest part, of that aspect of their involvement very early.
Yeah.
Then life happens, right? Then mom gets back on her feet, the grandparents leave, and then it was pretty important for us to spend time with them, as we could. But I also think, which was really interesting, and I think powerful, is that both of those ladies wanted my parents to get their life back together and their family together, and not and rebuild their strength together,
Mhm.
and not
Yeah.
be over the top all the time. So they went back to their lives, and then we visited, and ultimately we did make a move from Connecticut down to Florida to be closer to my mother's mom, as she was getting older and having some health challenges. So
Yeah,
um,
that's beautiful. That's the way it should be. Family is meant to step in and fill the gaps and be there for one another, and it's the way the body of Christ is supposed to be as family as well. And so that's wonderful you were able to kind of give back. And I love hearing about the generations of gratitude because honestly, whoever started, gratitude is a choice and it's a discipline. And like I said, once that's what you're around and once you start, it's so much easier to live life that way, and it makes such a big difference, right? Just you have a situation that's not so great, and you're able to and look around and find good things. It helps raise you above those circumstances, and I'm just so grateful that I learned how to choose it because I remember the days when I didn't. I can still remember the days when I didn't look for the good and life didn't feel the same. So I'm so happy for you. You've kind of always had that.
yes, that's so powerful. And if I may just say, it's not a light switch. It's not like, okay, I'm grateful today, because there are times when
No.
you go, really, another flat tire, or
Yep.
there's more month at the end of the money,
Yeah.
or those things, can, I mean, they're always going to be there as it relates to life events and life situations. It's
Hmm.
like you said, it's the choice.
Hmm.
And it is something that you kind of have to be conscious about. Maybe it gets unconscious after a while. You just kind of go to gratitude. But
Hmm.
I do think it is a constant choice. We must look at the situation and say, what can I find in this to be grateful
Oh,
about?
absolutely. It's got to be intentional. And I recently was a guest on someone's show where we were talking about the connection between courage and gratitude. And I said it's courageous to choose gratitude when you're in one of those situations, right? It's actually brave for you to say, "Hey, I'm not gonna look at what's so blatantly clearly here. I'm going to look beyond it and I'm going to choose to find something good and I'm going to hold on to that hope."
Yeah, it's so easy to be grateful when everything's going awesome.
Right, right. Yeah.
It's when it gets messy, and life does get messy, right? I mean, we're going to talk through some
Sure.
of that a little bit later, but life can get messy at times where it's not what you expect. And
Mhm.
why can't I catch a break? Or you kind of look out and you see others, what appears to be flourishing, and you're struggling, and
Mhm.
making the choice of gratitude through difficulty is, I think,
Mhm.
really this it's sort of the stretching of that gratitude muscle. Not that we're looking for things that are going sideways, but when they do, more
Yeah.
times we choose the gratitude lane to swim in,
Mhm.
the more comfortable we become at it.
Yeah. And life has so many different seasons. I mean, just look at Ecclesiastes and all the things that it lists, some of those things are not good things. They don't sound like happy things, but yet they're still a part of every person's life. And, finding a way to make our way through those things and to be able to focus on goodness, it really is the biggest blessing I've ever had, because I learned to choose gratitude in one of the worst times of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But it was only because I had the hope of this relationship with Jesus to turn to.
Absolutely. And a lot of that to me has come, of late, specifically, of surrounding myself with people who are in that same space of finding the place for gratitude, understanding grace, understanding peace beyond our understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it does take that, I believe, as opposed to just being able to do that on our own.
Yeah, I just saw a video. I think I even shared it on my Instagram very recently, and I'm so sorry I can't remember who it was that was saying it, but she said, when we have that peace that's beyond understanding, it's when we let go of needing the understanding, And I thought that was so great. What a powerful statement, when it's all about that same resting, that settling, that trust, settling in and trusting in who God is. And I know that as you moved on through life, there was also, so you had this gratitude, you had this love of words and characters and stories, and you also had a love of music. You said that your father loved jazz and played in a band. Were you musical? Did you play anything?
Yeah, I at about age 5, I started climbing behind the drums, trying to imitate my dad, and just loved the way he played. I loved the style of music he loved. He loved the New Orleans style of jazz music, which does have a hymn-based, faith-based aspect to it, and that was where his heart really was playing New Orleans style jazz, and then having the opportunity to also perform some of those hymns.
Wow.
Just a closer walk with thee, the old rugged cross, are two of the ones I just remember his favorites, and they would, whenever possible, arrange for a jazz church service.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it was a Sunday evening or something where they'd come in and do mostly the hymns, and he just loved that. And I grew up playing the drums behind him and had a lot of opportunities in the town we grew up in Florida to play, in the high school bands, and the town I grew up in was Scottish, called Dunedin, Florida. Shout out to Dunedin. And the bagpipes and drums, which have such, amazing grace on the bagpipes is enough said. I don't need to say anything else except the hair goes up on my neck when I hear that, Amanda.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the jazz thing. So yeah, I really, really loved the music aspect and kind of stepped in to emulate my father as best I could.
That's awesome. You ended up going on to Florida State University. What did you study?
First year I studied music. I was my last year of high school, I probably shouldn't say this because the school district might get in trouble, but I had 5 music classes my last semester of high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was all in and went to Florida State University to study music, finished the first year, and then kind of realized that there was probably more I should do. Just the music profession was going to be very difficult, and a lot of the styles of music I had, and the environment that you had to be in, and all of that was it was hard. I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was going to be a tough road, and so I was able to just adjust to the music school, from the music school to the business school,
Mm-hmm.
and got a degree in marketing with a minor in music.
Okay. That's a very big stretch, going from something very creative to something very, very set in its ways. Business is something that you do it this way. um,
Yeah. I think the
yeah.
one thing that I gravitated to was the specialization in marketing, because that
Okay.
still had a little bit of, you know, consumer behavior. You
Yeah.
look at ads, you look at creativity, that side of side. Now, when it came to finance and accounting, not
Hmm.
so much, but the creative
Okay.
side I enjoyed a good bit.
That makes sense. Okay. I'm glad that's the part you were drawn to. Now, what was your faith like in college? I know so many people that I speak with, self included, um, that seems to be the time in their life where they're on their own and just kind of enjoying life and maybe not so much following after a relationship with God. What was your experience?
Probably a little bit of both of those, Amanda. Leaving, we were in church, through graduating high school. For me, it was the Sunday thing and the Sunday school and then some youth groups.
Hmm.
And moving to college, you're right. I mean, anybody that's gone through that, or maybe their child's getting ready to, there's everything you could possibly imagine available.
Hmm.
And it's a different setting, especially if your family's been close, and there's not been a lot of variation in life, so you're exposed to a lot of things. So being in the music school was insanely diverse.
Hmm.
I'm saying like just very, very diverse, quite diverse, extensively diverse, because people came from all over the globe.
Yeah.
Florida State University was primarily a classical university and had some world-renowned vocal, piano, guitar, and instrumental instructors. So the diversity was quite wide. Yet some of the folks that I was in the percussion studio with and some other musicians, were pretty active in their faith. So it was something that I stuck to. Not as much probably as having dad's influence and mom's influence, but it was something that I pursued at least when I first got there. And
Hmm.
then in the business school that changed up a little bit. I mean, the
Hmm.
diversity was not as much there, but yeah, there was. I remember the churches in Tallahassee that we'd go to. We'd perform some music, right? We were in the music school, so we'd get in some of the ensembles that were singing or needed percussion parts, and such as that. So
Awesome.
I think
Awesome.
I
Sounds
think
like
it
you had
became
a
I think it
tension
became
between the two. You had
yeah.
both. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it became a little bit more of a independent relationship with my faith rather than
Hmm.
more of a family-based one, if that makes sense. You kind of,
Yeah. You
you know,
began to own it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. Now, we did speak during our pre-recording call about a time when you feel like that was the time when you really fully submitted to God. You had been let go from a company where you had worked. What did that time feel like? Why do you say that's your memory of submitting to God fully?
yeah. So we can tie this stuff maybe together a little bit, and I love how we've kind of set this together because I hopefully it'll sometimes you walk around the back of the barn to come through the door, so maybe we can tie this together. Mom's gratitude and dad's love of words were always there. It was a
Hmm.
given. I did experience a layoff from a company that I'd worked for a little over 2 decades. And when that happened, I came home the next morning. I woke up literally the next morning. I had a notepad by my bed because, okay, what do I got to do tomorrow? Okay, got to start working on the resume. You got to make some phone calls. Who do I want to call? You just start thinking through the stuff. Then
Hmm.
you organize it later. But the first thing that came to my head was a single word that said, Bruce, you need to be strong. I said, okay, so what does that mean? So I just looked at the word and I wrote it vertically. So, just straight down the line. And I looked
Hmm.
at it, and in a matter of a minute, I just took, and with each letter, I wrote a word, which became stand tall, remain optimistic, now go for it. I looked at it and I said, where did this come from?
Hmm.
Okay. Right. And then, okay,
Right.
there goes mom's gratitude
Hmm.
pouring into me, dad's
Right.
love of words. And I said, okay, I don't know if I can for 5 minutes figure out how to be strong today.
Yeah.
God giving me, I didn't say at that moment, God gave me that.
Hmm.
I just wrote it down and I said,
Right.
okay, power on, be optimistic, do all the things that, you know, put nose to the grindstone, everything will work out. Just went right back to the mom and dad things. And what happened during that next several weeks was that every morning another word would pop in my head. Like, Bruce, today's going to be awesome. And I wrote it vertically. A wonderful experience shall overwhelm my expectation. Okay, what does that mean? Today's going to be awesome. And I think it was maybe I caught a bunch of green lights down the highway or something.
Right.
It was a
Right.
way for the gratitude to come together with the
Hmm.
power of words. And so when that started happening, it went on for 420 some consecutive mornings. I wrote a different word.
Mm-hmm.
And both mom and dad had passed. It was like, okay, this is not from me, because
Yeah.
it's lifting me up. And then Amanda, I started sharing it, just these writings each morning. And when I realized some feedback I was getting, a text back, or someone would call
Mm-hmm.
me and say, I thank you for sending me that word,
Mm.
faith, facing anything insurmountable, trust him. And they'd message me and they'd say, I needed that today,
Wow.
meant that this is pouring through me. I'm just a pen in the hand. Just write, just keep writing. So, that's the only place I could go. I mean, I could own that and say, yeah, that's just me. I'm a great poet. I could write acrostics and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all of what we've talked about up to this moment was where that iron forged together, the two pieces of mom's gratitude, dad's love of words, and God saying, this is now your gift that you are going to use for the rest of your life, was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm in. I'm
Wow.
all in.
That's really powerful. I mean, to be honest, do you think that ever would have started, that you ever would have done that? You would have been able to even hear God, and that you would have been available to write these down every day and then start sharing them if you hadn't been through a difficult thing like losing your job?
Without having mom's gratitude come into focus when that was happening,
Hmm.
no way. Because
Yeah.
I could have found a spiral. I could have found
Right.
a sewer line to go down. And I will say there were days, right? Oh my gosh, am I going to figure this out? You have these
Yeah.
conversations with God, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so the short answer is there's no way, no way.
I love how what God does a lot of times when we're at the end of ourselves or we're in a difficult season, he gives us an opportunity for ministry. He gives us a chance to be that conduit, that thing that he uses to overflow into other people. And I love how he married these two things that you really, really loved about your parents together to do it. I think it's just a beautiful part of your story.
Thank you. And you know, I've been taught several different sports in my life. Tennis was probably the first one I played.
Hmm.
And then when I went to start taking some golf lessons, the golf instructor said to me, "What other sports do you play?" And I said, "Tennis." And he said, "Okay, you know that feeling where you always want your body to move forward when you're hitting a tennis ball, like towards the net?" He
Hmm.
said, "That's the feeling we want to have when we start our downswing to hit the golf ball." So why
Hmm.
am I saying that? I'm saying that what we learn through life is there for us to apply it to something else.
Amen. Amen. That's absolutely true. And I love just how it's moved forward, right? This is why I start at the beginning, because it's very clear God was writing a story, but yet you got choice all along the way, whether you were going to be a part of it in the way that he wanted to write it. You eventually wrote a book with all of these beautiful acronyms that are just really powerful. You did a TED Talk. You started speaking, donating books. Now, how did all of that come to be?
The simple answer is I said yes.
Hmm.
And I kept saying yes because I felt once a friend of mine called me after I had texted him a word, and this friend is a pediatric heart surgeon, texted me that night. He said, "I needed that word you sent me today." I called him, we talked. I said, "Talk to me about that." He said, "I was scrubbing. We have a ritual. We scrub for a period of time, not just getting our hands clean, but thinking through the process of the surgery we're getting ready to go do."
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting ready to operate on a baby that I think was 7 days old and had a defective heart.
Hmm.
He said there were 10 things that could have appeared when I opened the child's chest. And with those 10 things, there could have been 10 potential solutions. And my mind was going in every direction. My
Mm.
phone went off. One of the assistant that I had looked at my phone, and I said, what is it? He said, it's a text from Bruce, and it's the word calm, which became catch a little moment. And Jeff said, I needed to catch a little moment because I had so much going on. So it all started to change and be relevant to say yes when that kind of, it's not validation, Amanda, it's almost affirmation that that is coming through me. So
Yeah.
I questioned it too, to kind of explain that. Okay, Bruce lost a job, big deal. That happens all the time. Is the story relevant? I mean, I don't want to go out and talk about myself.
Right.
Going through the pain of the change and all of that and the gift I was given, but it wasn't other things that might be perceived by others as a bigger thing to have overcome. But I just kept saying yes to, okay, turn this into a book. Okay. How do you do that, right? Do you pay for it? Do you find someone who says, oh, I love your story, I want to do it for you? I didn't know. I just tried to say, I'm going to step.
Yep.
Then we got to that part. And then it was, okay, now give them away. Like every time I do a talk or every time I sell a book, my goal is to find a place for a book to land or an organization that I can provide books to. So that's sort of the mission.
Yeah.
How am I going to fund that? Don't worry, just do it. Okay, now here's an opportunity to apply for a TED Talk. Well, I've been doing sales presentations my entire career. Feature, advantage, benefit, here's the value it brings, and it's like selling a product.
Right.
A TED Talk, that's pro. I mean, that's beyond pitching something. That's an idea you're sharing. Really? Just audition. Okay. I mean, it was sort of like this ongoing dialogue that I felt in me to just keep going and now go speak and speak in some pretty hard places. You mentioned in the bio of the trafficking and exploited services group that I work with here in Atlanta called Wellspring Living. I've spoken at a inpatient alcohol and dependency adolescent hospital. How am I going to relate my story of not having any of those things happen in my life as a youngster? We went through my background. Right. And God just said, everyone has a BAM moment, BAM. It's when everything is going one way and then the next day it's not that way. Could be a diagnosis, could be a relationship, could be a job loss, could be a catastrophic accident. So it all changed just, I'm going to say incrementally, by saying yes, because I got back into the healthcare technology business and I had been doing that. And, I've now said, no, full time. I'm following this and God's going to continue to provide. So it's a long-winded answer as to how it's sort of changed me.
Not really. That's how God works, though. It's one obedience at a time. And the way that he works is he gives us an opportunity to be obedient. And if we are, then we receive a blessing. And it's not why we're obedient. It's just his heart that he blesses us with something unexpected. And that's what we move forward with to our next chance to be obedient. And it's funny, I was just talking with someone today about diapause. Diapause is where, this is going to sound really silly, but this is what God's bringing to mind. So when you have, this is a time of year when caterpillars become butterflies, right? So if a caterpillar doesn't go in and create its cocoon and go through that change so that it can grow the wings and become a butterfly and become this new creature, right? It actually can choose not to, and that's called diapause. It can choose to stay without changing. Now, it doesn't get to say maybe, I don't know, in the middle of the winter, say, okay, well, now I want to do it. It has to wait until the next right season. So it would have to wait till the next spring. Okay. But God allows that caterpillar to still have choice, just like he allows us to have choice. And so there are some that choose to stay stagnant and to not go into the cocoon. Cocoons or new seasons or those BAM moments, they're sometimes scary. They're dark. You're by yourself, you're secluded, and you're waiting and you don't really know what's happening. But those caterpillars, right, that go into diapause and don't become butterflies, they never get, through the obedience of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. It might be scary. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is what I'm feeling called to do. They will never get to fly. God
Mm.
takes us to this next level of our ministry and our purpose and our calling every time we are obedient to his will for us, because his will for us is always going to be what's best for us, as well as it's going to continue to share his kingdom.
Absolutely. And I also, if I can just add maybe to that, as you're saying this, it just kind of came to mind.
Sure.
There are times in our own process, in our own season, because I think that he reinvents us many times over, that we might
Absolutely.
stay in the non-butterfly
Hmm.
mode for a season, and we get stuck sometimes,
Hmm. Yeah,
and that's kind of part of the process, I think, because
absolutely.
keeping the, somebody said to me, and this is more of just a saying, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And sometimes being new at something,
Hmm.
whether it's a step out in your faith, whether it's, trying a new craft, whether it's developing your gift and you're new at it, the key is to go very slow at learning what that is, what it means, maybe what God's trying to say to us in slow and smooth and quiet. The cool thing about the words silent and listen is they have the same letters in them.
That's right.
And those seasons sometimes can be various versions of what you just described. At least that's what I've experienced. There's been times when I felt stuck. There's been times when I
Hmm.
felt, oh man, I'm not in a good routine.
Hmm.
You maybe I've drifted. God never leaves me. It's always me that's sliding away, and I can tell. And that's when I, turn back, and he's always there. So anyway, I thought that would add a little bit to this
Oh,
process of being the cocoon into the butterfly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my journey has been, 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, and I think that's what we all go through. And that cadence that God walks with us through each direction, right? He doesn't, like you said, he doesn't leave us. He doesn't just say, okay, well, you went backwards, you slid away. I'm so sorry. I'm moving on. No, he's so intentional to minister to us in those times and to give us the hope that we can have because of what Jesus went to the cross to do for us.
And
Uh,
I would say if it's 5 steps, 3 steps forward and 5 steps back, just make it part of the dance.
yes, yes, absolutely. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. And, not being stuck forever. We get stuck, all of us do. I think it's when we actually hear the voice of God and we receive the encouragement and his sacrificial, compassionate love that we can begin to believe that we can move forward again. And so it's those very intense, intimate encounters with God. I think those times of sitting at his feet, or even the times where he interrupts you. You love when he does that. He'll interrupt you with something so unexpected. You're seeing the situation or yourself one way, and God interrupts you and shows you how he sees it, and everything changes in that moment. So, yes, it's so important that you're going to these places. And yeah, you might not have everything in common with every place you go, but you're right. Every one of us is a human being, and we all have that in common. And it's so wonderful that I love to hear that you're donating books. And when we get down towards the end, we'll remind everyone to go into the show notes and look at all the things you're doing. And hopefully some folks will want to donate some books as well. It is it- positivity, joy, gratitude, all the positive things. It's such a gift to be able to give to someone that maybe is in one of those stuck moments.
Yeah. So let's
Yeah.
talk about stuck for 2 seconds more.
Sure.
Stuck meaning you can't move, or stuck meaning you stuck with it. Just two ways to look at that word.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the way that God has your mind working, that this is the way, it's obvious that this is your calling, and that he is using, again, like I said, it's so beautiful. He's using the marriage of your father's love for words and his way of looking at them, even the way that he named the characters is very much similar to what you're doing as how you recognize words and the things that God has you recognize about them. I love how when they talk about in the tabernacle, there's so many different people that have different spiritual giftings and talents from the Lord. And as a creative person, I'd never quite seen myself being able to use those things when I was younger in Christ. And then the one day I read about the tabernacle and how it was talking about these curtains that were made and how they were woven together, and how these pomegranates were at the bottom, and then there were these carvings and on the wall, and how each one of these people was gifted as a skilled craftsman from God to do those very things, every little detail. So no matter what kind of person you are, God has a plan and a purpose for the way that he made you, and for you to be able to move forward in life and to enjoy those gifts.
So one of my favorite words is the word gifts. And if you write it vertically, and you said it perfectly, we all have them. They're different. They may be creative. They may be analytical. They may be technical. They may be athletic. They might be vocal. They might be nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And gifts to me, just vertically, is God installed features to share.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if anyone's out there saying, what's mine? I don't know. Everybody else seems to have one. I can't find my thing. Well, you've got them. It's our job to search for them. Shake a few in, shake a few out. For me, there was drumming, and there was this, and there was baseball, and there were these other things. And our job to shake them there, but he will help us. I consider God the whittler and me just a piece of wood. And that can help us find those gifts. So anyway, I would encourage those who are maybe saying, I don't see mine yet. That's okay. Keep looking. It will find you.
And you know what? Most of the time it's our friends who know exactly what our gifts are, and we can see them in other people as well. So, if you can't figure out what it is, just ask some people to describe you. I did that one time for a writing piece. I said, if you had to describe me in some way, what would it be? Because I wanted to talk about me in Christ now, and that's how people know me now versus what I was sharing about me before. And it was amazing how many people said similar things. So normally the people around you can see clear as day what your giftings are.
Yeah. And it's usually something that puts a smile on your face one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How amazing is it that we get gifts from God at all, right?
A blessing.
Yeah. Now, you met your wife. Y'all had children. What was being a dad like for you? Because you so highly esteemed your parents, and especially you talked quite a lot during our pre-recording call about your dad. So tell me, what was being a dad like?
Yeah. The most amazing, undescribable. This would be a whole other podcast by itself, not just an episode.
Right.
So
Yeah.
let me just. So it was there was a struggle for me. The back a little bit more of the story is my mom lived till I was 22, and my dad lived until I was 36. So he was 66 when he died, and mom was 53 when she died. And my wife was pregnant with our oldest child when my father passed, and he struggled with dementia and Alzheimer's towards the end of his life, but it was very young, 66, early onset. And I was at the last minute at the graveside service asked by the minister if the next day I would do at the memorial service my dad's eulogy. Had no prep for that except that ask like 12 hours before. And what I learned, and I did that, but the point I'm saying there is what I learned from that process was that dad was always my teacher. And that was the moment when it was my turn, especially with a child on the way, to go from student to do everything I could to be a teacher, taking the things that I learned from my parents and my faith as best I could going forward. And we had 2 daughters, and my wife and I have had many, many conversations as we've raised them. They're now adults.
Mm-hmm.
That a father's influence on a daughter is one of the key things to their self-confidence, their self-worth, and for them, believing in themselves and that they are worthy, all the things that you would want for a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So as opposed to corporate ladder, I'll fly anywhere, what position I'm going to aspire to, those, which are, nothing's wrong with that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, my biggest, what's the word I want to say, appreciation of being a dad was the ability to be present as best I possibly could.
Yeah.
So, our oldest daughter played volleyball, played soccer in school, just finished about almost a year ago, finished her doctorate in physical therapy, and she's a practicing physical therapist. That is the biggest joy that I could have, is to see her joyful in the work she's doing.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it's like, my dad used to say, I raise you so you leave the nest, not so
Mm-hmm.
you build a nest in my nest. And not saying pushing them out, but just to see them make
Yeah.
some decisions on their own, those kind of things. And my youngest will be finishing her master's here in May in sports management. She played soccer in college, and she's working through the process now of interviewing and those types of things. And just going from just trying to help them make wise decisions early.
Mm-hmm.
Small consequences early have proven to have them want to avoid big consequences later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be a Sherpa, allow them, be their guide, but allow them to, they're the one reaching the summit. It's been, it's a gift beyond my ability to understand why I deserved it, and just try to honor it as being a
Mm-hmm.
dad, having
Yeah.
parents that, were a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I feel the same way. What a blessing children are to those of us who receive them. And it's a great responsibility. And it's you're walking with this tension between wanting to keep them safe and also allowing them the space to make choices of their own and be the best person that they could be, not not teaching them how to do everything, but teaching them how to learn from everyone and everything, if that makes sense. Yeah. Now, you have a couple of things that you do I think are really cool. You had told me about an In His Grip Ministries, and
Mm-hmm.
also that you offer Walk and Talk Facebook Live on Saturdays. So, what are those two things?
Yeah. So when the when the universe shut down and we went from 3-dimensional, seeing each other and hugging each other, to 2-dimensional, you pick the technology that you use, whether it's Skype, Zoom, Teams. I was so blessed to be introduced by that golf professional who put the club in my hand the first time and said, "It's just like tennis, just push off your left foot or your right foot."
Mm-hmm.
Introduced to a group of men in Nashville, Tennessee, that had started a ministry many years prior, of just men at golf courses, maybe usually at the clubhouse. They'd meet in
Mm-hmm.
the mornings, and they would do a very specific, simple process of reading the Bible. They would pick a book, and day by day the chapter would change. Right, you'd go, John 1 on the first day of the month, John 2, John 3.
Mm-hmm.
You would read it. You would pick a verse. You would write the verse down, and that's the G of grip.
Mm-hmm.
The R is a process by which, what does that reveal to me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What am I taking? What is the Spirit giving me to think about? Then the I is, how do I then today, right now, how do I implement what's being revealed? What can I do
Right.
in my life today? And then the P is to pray out for that wisdom, opportunity, discernment, whatever the implementation would be. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's an organization that is growing, in hisgripministries.com, led by a gentleman named Scott Lehman. And so every Wednesday night, because I'm in Atlanta and these guys are all over the world, Uganda, Australia, Puerto Rico, in various states, we
Mm-hmm.
Zoom together on Wednesday night and we grip one designated verse as a Zoom group.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that for 1,200 days of gripping. And then, of course, once a week we meet. So that has been incredibly powerful to me. And what it's given me is, men, and this is a generalization, but it's difficult for us often to talk about the challenges we're going through, whether it's a relationship, a work thing, etc. And it's a safe zone for us to take our faith as the base and ask for prayers and talk about what we're struggling with, but also celebrate the fact that, what we've been given without the ability to ask or do anything to get it. And that's God's grace and a path and his promise and all of those things. We celebrate that. And, we try to pour that back into our families. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, but yeah, so that's what In His Grip is. And it's just something that pours into me, because I do believe you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to be around that to get that energy and that spirit continuing to grow.
Absolutely. And community is essential.
Yeah. And then the walk and talk, going live on Facebook, the social media, as we all know, has all kinds of ups and downs, right? Double-edged sword, right? For sure.
Right.
And, I write these words every morning. I post a mindset message, which is the words as we talked about them. I'm still writing and posting them on my social pages. But about 3 years ago, again, when everything kind of closed down, I said, how do I stay connected to people that I've been connected to, but I can't do it in the same way anymore, right? At this point.
Right.
So I just pushed the live button on Facebook and just went for a walk in a path behind our house and just said, hey, here's a word that's been on my heart, and, I talk about it. I talk about the downside of things and the upside of things. Like one of the words I wrote was the word temper. And sometimes the first thing we go to is short fuse, right? Or angered easily. And so I wrote temper vertically and kind of what does that mean with that? And then I said, but guys and gals, and I'm just talking to the phone, right, as I'm walking, and folks jump on and listen and comment in. I said, well, what is it when you temper something? You turn down the temperature of something, or the glass on a windshield of your car, that's all tempered glass now, so it doesn't shatter when it's hit. So I just try to put some perspective of what's been on my mind, not just in writing, but I've sort of, and that also led to our podcast, Can I Have a Word with You? Because we unpack a word the same way. But, I just walk and it helps me, I call it unpack, kind of unpack a word that's been on my heart that maybe I wrote, but then during the week I've thought about it and we have a little dialogue. Sometimes another person will come on Facebook with me and we'll split the screen and just chat about it. And, it's 10 to 20 minutes of a walk and, it helps fill me up too. So that's something that I do.
That's awesome. Now, you co-host a podcast that you're saying. How does that work? So you have these words that you're unpacking. How does your podcast appear? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so it is intentionally unglitzy and probably not super polished, but that's the intent. So there's a dear friend who I've never met in person. Her name's Heather Carter, and Heather's written a couple of books, and she wrote them through blogging through her cancer treatment. And she is a surthriver, is what we refer to them as, not a survivor, but a surthriver of cancer. And we both love words. And so it's, hey, Heather, can I have a word with you? Yeah, Bruce, what do you want to talk about today? So we'll pick a word that we've written, I've written vertically, and we'll talk about it. One of the recent ones we did was pressure. What's that like? Is it good? Can it be bad? That just, okay, what does it mean? And we just talk about things in life that we've experienced, not necessarily even that we've come through, Amanda. It might be something that we're right now dealing with.
Right.
And we talk for 20 minutes. And the idea there is, to pay attention to our words, because they really have an impact on our thoughts, all those things we taught you. You said in the introduction. And try to offer a nugget, what we call kind of an activational nugget. What can we do with this if we're struggling through a X And, maybe it's conflict. We write down the word conflict. Well, what can we do when there's a conflict? Well, maybe the first thing we do is we pause. Maybe we step
Hmm.
back. Maybe we,
Hmm.
so we just kind of talk about ways that maybe we can work through something just by, remember, your parents might say, hey, I need a word with you. And it usually wasn't a good thing, right? We
Right.
try to unpack it and say, hey, can I have a word with you? And try to turn it into a positive. We've been
I
going
love
on about a
that.
year now, almost a year. Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. I just completed 2 years, and it's a very interesting platform to have. I think podcasting is just such an intimate thing. You've got someone's attention. They typically have earphones in, or they're driving, or doing the laundry, or doing something else. And so it's this chance to really get someone's attention. And I think that's awesome. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And Heather was actually a guest on my podcast a while back, so you can go back and look for that. I might make a note in the show notes for you if you wanted to hear her interview as well. Unfortunately, don't have memorized which one it is. When you get into 5 seasons and you've put out over 115, it's very, very difficult to remember who was on what season and what episode. But I am going to put in the show notes for sure, though, ways for you to follow Bruce in some of these great things that he's doing. And again, maybe if it's on your heart to help with some books ending up being donated to people who might need them. Also, I have one question left, and it is my favorite question. I ask it every week and end every podcast with it, just because it's one of those open-ended questions that people answer so individually, and it's always so good. So, would you tell us that if you could go back and you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
If I were to go back and give my younger self some advice, what would it be? Say yes more often.
Oh, that's a good one.
Say
What makes
yes.
you say that?
I
Why do you
think,
think?
yeah, questioning myself has often delayed what. Now, no, caution, wise decisions. Don't get me wrong. Not just yes to the flu, but I mean something that's on your heart. It's
Correct.
there for a reason.
Hmm.
Saying yes without knowing how, it's kind of like being willing to do the jigsaw puzzle
Hmm.
without having the box top. Like,
Yep.
go and sort of the way will present itself, and always stay in that faith walk, or get there, get stronger in it, find your way back to it, wherever you are in life. I would say yes to those callings. And I would say that because, now that I'm speaking full time and I'm doing workshops and I'm out there traveling and being, looking for more opportunities to be booked to speak, etc.
Hmm.
It is so fulfilling. And I did wait. Like I said, I had a foot in two canoes for a long time of doing the corporate work and this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And but God's prepared me for this. So saying yes along the way has allowed me to continue to grow. And I think that's what it
Yeah.
takes to grow, is to say yes.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Now, putting you on the spot, but do you have an acronym for yes?
You expect success.
There you go. See, works perfectly. That's awesome. Well, Bruce, I could probably talk to you for hours. I find your life really interesting, and I love to see the hand of God in people's lives so clearly. And in your story, it's really evident. I love all the little details and how God doesn't waste a thing. I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us.
It has been my pleasure, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing. And please keep that up, because that's pouring into folks that the ripple you will never know. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I get to do it. It's amazing to me the things that, like you said, life is exciting. When you say yes to the things God asks you to do, it's such an abundant life. And this part of it, getting to be encouraged every week and then share that encouragement, it's life sustaining. It's really wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. You make it a blessed day.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.